I found my own face on a dating app at 9:14 on a Tuesday night, smiling back at me in a red sweater I only wore to Thanksgiving dinner at my mother-in-law's house, and my husband was standing right beside me when the first message notification popped up. For one strange second, I thought it had to be some kind of mistake. Maybe someone who looked like me. Maybe a fake account built from stolen photos scraped off social media, like you hear about on the news. But then I saw the kitchen tile in the background of the second picture, the pale blue dish towel hanging over the oven handle, and the little ceramic pumpkin I only brought out in November. That was my kitchen, my house, my face, my smile, my life, packaged into something ugly and deliberate. "Claire," Ethan said, and I knew from the way he said my name that he wanted an explanation before he even understood what he was looking at. His voice wasn't loud. That would have been easier. It was careful, controlled, the kind of voice people use when they're already afraid of the answer. I reached for his phone with fingers that suddenly didn't feel like mine. The profile name wasn't even subtle. It used my first name, my real age, and a bio written in a version of me that felt like an insult disguised as flirtation. Newly ready for excitement. Tired of routine. Looking for a man who knows how to keep a secret. I read it once. Then again. Each word landed like a cold drop of rain down the back of my neck. "This isn't me," I said, and I hated how thin my voice sounded. Ethan didn't answer right away. He just stared at the screen, jaw tight, thumb hovering over the messages. We had been married for 6 years, and in all that time, I had learned something uncomfortable about doubt. It never announces itself. It just appears in a room and changes the temperature. "Then why are those your pictures?" he asked quietly. I should have been furious. I should have shouted. I should have demanded he trust me. But the truth is, the moment I saw the third photo, I stopped feeling panic and started feeling something colder. Because that photo had never been posted anywhere. It was taken in his mother's backyard. During our 4th of July cookout, right after his aunt spilled lemonade on the patio, and everyone laughed except Evelyn, who had been watching me with that thin little smile she wore whenever she thought no one noticed. Only family had that photo. Only family had any of them. That was when the first message notification opened on its own, and Ethan's face changed. Not because of what the stranger wrote, but because of the name attached to the profile that had matched with mine. Nathan Cole, his late father's attorney, his mother's oldest family friend, a man who had known Ethan since he was 10 years old. The room went still around us. I looked at the screen, then at my husband, and something inside me settled into place with terrifying clarity. Someone wanted me to look unfaithful. Someone wanted Ethan to see it. And someone had chosen a man whose name would make sure the damage landed exactly where it was meant to. I took a slow breath, set his phone carefully on the kitchen counter, and said the only thing I was absolutely sure of. This didn't come from a stranger. For a long moment, Ethan did not move. He just stood there in our kitchen with one hand braced against the counter, staring at the phone like it had turned into something dangerous. The dishwasher hummed softly behind us. The clock above the stove ticked louder than I had ever noticed before. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary Tuesday night sounds. And somehow that made it worse, because there is something especially cruel about betrayal arriving in the middle of a normal life. "You think my mother did this?" he finally asked, but he did not sound angry. He sounded tired, like the idea itself had exhausted him before he was willing to believe it. I folded my arms, not because I was cold, but because I needed something to hold together. I think those photos were never public. I think Nathan Cole is not a random match. And I think your mother has spent 6 years trying to make me look like a problem she needed to solve. He looked away at that. Not toward me. Not toward the phone. Toward the dark window over the sink, where our reflections floated faintly over the backyard. "That is a big accusation, Claire." I almost laughed, not because anything was funny, but because that was exactly how Evelyn had trained him to respond. Not, "Is it true?" Not, "How could this happen?" Just, "That is a big accusation." She had always been careful that way. Never obvious. Never messy. Just small, polished cuts that left no blood behind. The first time I met her, she hugged me tightly and told me I was prettier than Ethan's ex, which would have sounded like a compliment if she had not said it while staring directly at the ex-girlfriend's framed photo still sitting on her piano. At our rehearsal dinner, she had told the waiter I was sensitive about carbs, and then smiled while I sat there with a dry salad and a table full of confused relatives. Our first Christmas as a married couple, she had called Ethan in tears because she was worried I seemed distant, when all I had done was say we were spending Christmas morning at my parents' house for the first time in 3 years. Every slight had been small enough to dismiss. Every insult wrapped in concern. Every boundary treated like a personal attack. I had spent years telling myself that difficult mothers raised difficult sons, and if I stayed calm enough, kind enough, patient enough, she would eventually run out of reasons to test me. But women like Evelyn do not get tired of testing. They get better at it. Ethan picked up the phone again and scrolled through the profile with a stiffness in his shoulders I recognized from every fight he hated having. Maybe somebody copied these from the family album, he said. Maybe Nathan did not know it was fake. Maybe, I said, because sometimes truth gets further when you stop chasing it. Then I stepped closer and pointed at the fourth photo, one I had missed in the shock of the first three. It was from our anniversary dinner last spring. I was laughing at something Ethan had said, candlelight on my face, his hand blurred at the edge of the frame. Evelyn had taken that photo herself. I remembered because she had looked at it afterward and said, "At least one of you photographs well." Ethan went still again. He did not say a word this time. He did not need to. I watched his expression shift, not all at once, but slowly, like a house settling after a storm. And for the first time that night, I knew he was finally looking at the same woman I had been living with for years. I did not sleep much that night. Ethan stayed up on the couch with his laptop open and the glow of the screen washing his face pale blue in the dark, while I lay in our bedroom staring at the ceiling fan turning slow circles above me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that profile again. My own smile, my own face, my own life arranged into a lie so carefully that it almost looked effortless. By 6:30 the next morning, I was already in the kitchen making coffee I did not want, listening to the machine sputter and hiss while the house felt too quiet for a place with two people inside it. Ethan came in wearing the same t-shirt from the night before, carrying his phone in one hand and rubbing the back of his neck with the other. He looked older than he had 24 hours earlier. "Nathan replied," he said. He did not sit down. He just stood there across from me, like the distance between us still needed managing. I set my mug down carefully. "What did he say?" Ethan unlocked the phone and read aloud in a flat voice. He said he thought it was strange. He said the profile messaged him first, mentioned my father, and asked if he ever regretted marrying too young. I felt something cold slide through my chest. That was not random. That was not trolling. That was not somebody fishing for attention. Whoever made that account knew exactly which nerve to press and exactly which name would rattle Ethan the fastest. Nathan Cole had been his father's estate attorney. Yes, but he had also been the man Ethan called after the funeral when he could not figure out what to do with his father's watch collection. The man who still sent Christmas cards every year. The man Evelyn called practically family whenever she wanted to remind people how connected she was. Did he know it was fake? I asked. Ethan shook his head. He says he figured it out after the first exchange. He stopped responding and took screenshots. He looked up at me then, and for the first time since this started, there was no suspicion in his face. Just something harder, more honest. He sent them to me. I held out my hand. The messages were short, polished, and somehow worse because of how believable they sounded. The profile had asked Nathan if he thought some marriages lasted longer than they should. Asked whether loyalty was always the same as love. Asked if he ever wondered what people would choose if they got one clean second chance. It was manipulative in a way that felt familiar, not because I would ever say things like that, but because Evelyn had always loved language that sounded thoughtful while meaning something poisonous. She never insulted directly if she could imply. She never accused if she could plant a seed and let somebody else water it. I scrolled once more and then froze. The account had sent one photo after the messages began, a close-up selfie from my front porch in a cream cardigan, sunlight across one side of my face. My stomach dropped so fast I had to grip the counter. "Ethan," I whispered. "That picture was never sent in the family album." He stepped closer. "What do you mean?" I zoomed in on the image until the details blurred. Then I pointed to the small brass house number plaque near the frame. "This was from the day your mother stopped by in March with those lemon bars. She said I looked nice and asked if she could take a picture because your grandmother would love to see me. I never posted it. I never texted it. She took it on her own phone." The kitchen went silent again, but this time it was not the silence of doubt. It was the silence that comes when a theory becomes a pattern and a pattern becomes proof. By 9 o'clock, the coffee in my mug had gone cold, and Ethan had still not called his mother. He kept pacing between the kitchen and the living room, phone in hand, thumb tapping against the case the way it always did when he was trying to talk himself into a decision he already knew he had to make. I did not push him. That was the thing Evelyn never understood about me. She thought silence meant weakness because she only ever used silence as a weapon. Mine was different. Mine was where I went to think. Mine was where I went when I was done, reacting and ready to start seeing clearly. I took my laptop to the dining room table and opened every shared family album we had ever used. Christmas, Easter, 4th of July, Thanksgiving, anniversaries, backyard cookouts, Sunday dinners at Evelyn's house with overcooked roast and too much commentary. I started moving slowly through each one, not looking for emotion anymore, just details, angles, backgrounds, who held the camera, which photos had been texted and which had only been shown in person. It was almost embarrassing how fast a marriage can become an investigation. By 10:15, I had built a list. 7 of the 9 photos on the fake profile had come directly from family events. 2 had never been uploaded anywhere. 1 from our anniversary dinner that Evelyn took herself. 1 from the porch in March that she claimed was for Ethan's grandmother. There was no version of this where a stranger had guessed correctly. There was no version of this where the account had been assembled by accident. Ethan stopped pacing when I slid the list across the table. He looked down at it, then back at me. "You did all this in an hour?" he asked. "I have had 6 years of practice noticing your mother's patterns," I said, and I meant it more gently than it sounded. His face tightened at that, but he did not argue. That was new too. Usually, when I mentioned Evelyn's behavior, he moved automatically into defense. "She means well. She is old-fashioned. She had a hard marriage. She does not know how she comes across." But there is a point where excuses stop sounding like loyalty and start sounding like permission, and I think he was finally standing at that point with nowhere else to look. My phone buzzed on the table. Maya. I had texted her before dawn with only 3 words. "I need help." She called immediately, and I put her on speaker. "Please tell me you did not murder anyone," she said, because that was Maya, dry even at the edge of disaster. "No," I said, "but my mother-in-law might be trying to end my marriage with a dating app." There was a pause. Then, "I am leaving work early." I gave her the short version, and unlike Ethan, she did not waste a single second pretending the situation was complicated. "That woman has been running along game since your bridal shower," she said. "You remember when she switched the gift tags and made it look like you forgot to thank her sister?" I did remember. I remembered every small misunderstanding that somehow always left me embarrassed and Evelyn innocent. Maya listened while I explained the photos, Nathan's messages, the porch picture. "Good," she said when I finished. "Good," Ethan repeated sharply. "Yes, good," she said. "Because messy people are hard to catch. Careful people get arrogant. And arrogant people always leave a trail." I looked down at the phone on the table, at my own face smiling up from a life I no longer trusted. And for the first time since the night before, I felt something steadier than shock. I felt the shape of a plan beginning to form. Maya arrived at 11:40 with an iced coffee in one hand and her laptop bag slung over her shoulder like she was coming to a deposition instead of my dining room. She kissed my cheek, gave Ethan a quick nod, and then looked at the phone on the table with the kind of focused expression she usually reserved for clients who thought deleting one email meant deleting evidence. "All right," she said, setting everything down. "Show me what your mother-in-law did." Ethan flinched at the wording, but he did not correct her. That alone told me how far things had shifted in less than 12 hours. We spent the next 40 minutes going through everything again. The profile, the photos, Nathan's screenshots, the timestamps, the family albums. Maya asked questions neither Ethan nor I had thought to ask yet. Had the account used an email? Did the app show a partial phone number? Was there a password reset option? Had the messages come before or after the match? It was strange how quickly a situation that had felt humiliating started to feel clinical under the right pair of eyes. Less like a personal collapse, more like a structure waiting to be mapped. Ethan forwarded Nathan's screenshots to Maya, and she enlarged each one, studying them with the concentration of someone assembling a puzzle from the edges inward. "There," she said at last, tapping the screen. "That is not a normal opener." I leaned in. The first message from the profile to Nathan had seemed vague at first, but now I saw what she meant. It referenced the lake house paperwork from years ago, Something so oddly specific I had skimmed right past it in my shock. Ethan frowned. My father's old lake property? Maya nodded slowly. Exactly. Not public information. Not even casual family friend information unless somebody has been listening to old conversations and knows what makes this man respond. Nathan had handled the legal transfer after Ethan's father passed away. Evelyn had complained about it for months because she believed the property should have stayed in the family, not been sold to settle estate taxes. She brought it up every Thanksgiving after 2 glasses of wine, always in that wistful, aggrieved tone that made grief sound like ownership. I remembered that now with uncomfortable clarity. So she picked him on purpose, I said quietly. She picked the one man who would answer if the message sounded familiar enough. Maya gave me a sharp look. And the one man whose name would hit Ethan like a truck if he saw it. Ethan exhaled through his nose and sat down hard in the chair beside me, like the truth had finally reached the part of him that could no longer stand. Maya kept going. The app account itself had a recovery email partially visible on the settings screen from one of Nathan's screenshots. Most of it was hidden, but not all. The first letter was an E. The domain was a free provider. The last 2 digits were 22. Burner email, she said. But careless people reuse patterns. Does Evelyn have any old usernames with 22? I stared at her, then at Ethan. He blinked once. Her birthday is June 22nd. None of us spoke for a second after that. Not because it proved everything, but because it felt exactly like her. Neat. Personal. Confident enough to leave a signature she assumed nobody would ever notice. My phone buzzed again, and this time it was a text from Nathan himself. Ethan read it aloud. I have more. I remembered who took one of those photos. Call me when you can. I looked at the screen, then at Ethan, then at Maya, and the room seemed to narrow around one brutal, simple fact. We were no longer trying to guess whether Evelyn had done this. We were collecting the pieces of how. Nathan answered on the second ring, his voice low and careful in the way older men sound when they already know a conversation has gone bad before it begins. Ethan put him on speaker and set the phone in the center of the dining room table, where it sat between the 3 of us like another piece of evidence. I am sorry, Claire, Nathan said first, and the fact that he addressed me before Ethan told me everything about who he thought had been wronged. The moment I saw the second message, I knew something was off. It did not sound like you. It sounded like someone trying to sound like a woman they do not respect. I looked at Ethan when he said that. He did not look back. You said you remembered one of the photos, Maya prompted. Nathan let out a small breath. The porch picture. I remember because Evelyn showed it to me in March at the country club luncheon. She said Claire was finally learning how to present herself properly and asked if I thought that cardigan color made her look approachable. My stomach turned, not from surprise, but from recognition. That was Evelyn exactly. She had always treated me like a project she had not approved but intended to renovate anyway. Did she send it to you? I asked. No, Nathan said. She held up her phone. But she lingered on it, almost like she wanted me to notice. Maya and I exchanged a look. That was not just proof she had the photo. That was premeditation. Not a spur-of-the-moment outburst. Not a bad decision made in anger. A setup that had been forming for months, maybe longer. Nathan continued, his voice sharpening now that he had committed himself to honesty. There is something else. The first message from the profile referenced the lake house because Evelyn and I argued about that sale 2 years ago at a holiday party. She told me Ethan had married too quickly and that young wives always liked what came with old money, even when there was not much left. The room went still around us. Ethan closed his eyes for a second, and I saw something painful move across his face. Not disbelief. Grief. There is a special kind of grief in realizing someone you love has been telling the same story about your marriage behind your back for years. She said that, he asked quietly. Nathan did not soften. She said worse. I did not repeat it because I assumed she was venting. I should have. After the call ended, nobody spoke for several seconds. Maya was the first to move. She opened her laptop, typed quickly, then turned the screen toward us. I searched the app support page, she said. If the profile is reported for impersonation, they preserve login activity for review. Sometimes not for long. We need screenshots, dates, and a formal complaint today. Ethan sat forward. Do it. That was the first direct, decisive thing he had said all morning, and I felt it like a door unlocking somewhere inside the house. Maya submitted the report from my email while I gathered every screenshot, every timestamp, every family photo source, every text from Nathan. Then she paused and looked at Ethan. If we are right, and we are, you cannot warn her. He frowned. I was not going to. Good, Maya said. Because the moment she knows you believe Claire, she deletes whatever is left. I looked down at my wedding ring, then back at my husband. He met my eyes fully this time. No hesitation, no fog. What do we do? He asked. I thought of Evelyn's perfect table settings, her polished silverware, her habit of smiling sweetest when she was about to humiliate someone. And for the first time since this began, I knew exactly where the truth needed to come out. We let her think she is still in control, I said. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, the house had settled into the kind of tense quiet that makes every small sound feel deliberate. Maya had gone back to her office after helping us organize the evidence into a folder so neat it looked almost harmless, and Ethan had finally done the one thing I knew mattered most. He called his mother and invited her to dinner on Sunday. Not because it was unusual, because it was not. Sunday dinners at Evelyn's house had been a ritual since before we got married. One of those family traditions that sounds warm when you say it out loud and exhausting when you actually live inside it. She answered on the second ring, cheerful in that polished way that always felt rehearsed. Of course, sweetheart, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. I was just thinking it had been too long. I will make the pot roast. Ethan glanced at me when she said that. She always made pot roast when she wanted to look like a mother and not a strategist. Great, he said, steady enough that I was proud of him. Claire and I will be there at 6. There was the briefest pause, barely a breath, but I heard it. She had not expected my name in the invitation. Wonderful, she said then, sweeter than before. I am so glad she is coming. After he hung up, he set the phone down and rubbed both hands over his face. I hate that I know what that pause meant now. I did not say I know. I did not need to. Some truths are more intimate when you leave them alone. The rest of Saturday moved slowly, but not aimlessly. We printed everything. Nathan's screenshots, the list of photo sources, the timestamps, the recovery email clue, a copy of the report Maya filed with the app. We even printed the porch photo and the anniversary photo side by side with notes under each one, not because Evelyn deserved a presentation, but because people like her survive by making other people doubt what they just saw. I was not going to let that happen this time. Ethan suggested confronting her privately before dinner, just the two of us, but I shook my head. No, I said. If she gets a warning, she gets time. She gets a story. She gets tears. She gets confusion. She gets to make me sound unstable before you finish a sentence. He looked down at the stack of papers between us and nodded slowly. So what then? I thought about every dinner at her house over the years. The heavy serving bowls. The lace runner she only used when guests were present. The way she placed people like furniture, always arranging the room to remind everyone who belonged where. I could see it so clearly I almost smelled the rosemary and onions. We do it at the table, I said, where she feels safest. Sunday came with bright weather that felt almost offensive. Warm sun, clear sky, the kind of perfect suburban afternoon that makes every house on the street look like it is hiding nothing at all. I wore a cream sweater and dark jeans, simple enough not to look defensive, calm enough not to look theatrical. Ethan wore a navy button-down and said very little on the drive over. At 5:58, we pulled into Evelyn's driveway. Her front porch was lined with mums and matching planters. Her brass door knocker gleamed. Her windows were spotless. She opened the door before we even knocked, lipstick perfect, pearls in place, the scent of roast and candles spilling out behind her like hospitality itself. She kissed Ethan's cheek first. Then she turned to me with that careful smile I had spent 6 years studying. Claire, she said warmly, reaching for my arm. You look lovely tonight. I smiled back, calm enough to surprise even myself. So do you, Evelyn, I said. And when she led us inside, I let her believe for just a little longer that she was welcoming me into her house instead of walking herself into the truth. Dinner at Evelyn's house always followed the same script. She brought the pot roast out in her oval white dish with the gold trim, spooned the carrots first because she liked people to notice the color, then sat at the head of the table like she had been born in that chair and expected to die in it. Usually, I spent those meals watching my words, smiling at the right moments, pretending her little corrections did not land exactly where they were aimed. That night, for the first time in 6 years, I let her perform without interrupting. She asked Ethan about work. She asked me if I was still keeping busy, in that tone she used when she wanted a career to sound like a hobby. She mentioned that Nathan had not been at church lately and sighed in a way that made his name feel almost accidental. I saw Ethan's hand tighten around his fork. I kept mine steady. Dessert came and went. Coffee was poured. The dishes were still on the table when I set my napkin down and looked directly at her. "Evelyn," I said softly, "there is something I want to ask you." She smiled immediately, because women like her love a stage before they know the script has changed. "Of course, dear." I reached into my tote bag and pulled out the first sheet of paper, then laid it beside her coffee cup. It was the fake profile. My face. My name. My age. That ugly little biography designed to sound like me if you had never actually listened to me once in your life. Evelyn's smile did not disappear right away. It thinned. "What is this?" she asked, and the innocence in her voice would have impressed me if I had not spent years watching her rehearse it. "That is what I would like to know," I said. Ethan reached into his jacket and placed Nathan's screenshots on the table next to mine. "It matched with Nathan," he said, his voice low and even, "and it messaged him first." Evelyn blinked once. Then she gave a small laugh. "Honestly, people do the strangest things online. Anyone can steal photos these days." "Not these photos," I said. Then I laid down the second sheet. "The porch picture. You took this in March when you brought lemon bars." Her fingers did not move, but I saw the smallest shift in her shoulders. I placed the third sheet beside it. "The anniversary photo. You took this one too." Ethan added the list of sources. "Family albums. Private images. Event dates. 7 came from shared family folders," he said. 2 never did." Evelyn looked from one page to the next, then back up at me, and for one brief second I saw it. Not panic. Calculation. She was deciding which version of herself would survive the evening. "Claire," she said gently, "I think you are upset, and I understand why. But this is exactly the kind of thing that can make a woman spiral. You have always been very sensitive." There it was. The old trick. Make me emotional. Make me unstable. Make herself the reasonable one. But before I could answer, Ethan slid the last page across the table. The recovery email clue. The hidden address beginning with E, ending in 22. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "June 22nd, he said. "Your birthday." For the first time all night, the room stopped belonging to her. She looked at him, not me, and I think that was the moment she understood the part she had miscalculated. She had built this whole thing to separate us. She had never imagined we would arrive together. "I was trying to protect you," she said finally, and the softness was gone now. The polish cracked just enough to show what had always been underneath. "You were making a mistake, Ethan. I needed you to see what kind of woman she is before she ruined your life." The words sat there between the coffee cups and dessert plates like a confession no one could take back. I looked at her for a long moment, then at my husband, and I knew before he even spoke that she had just lost the only audience she had ever really cared about. Ethan did not shout. That was the part one remembered most later, not because I had expected anger, but because silence can sound more final than rage when it comes from the right person. He looked at his mother for a long moment, the kind of long that forces truth to sit in the room without decoration, and when he finally spoke, his voice was so calm it made Evelyn straighten in her chair like she had been slapped by the absence of panic. "You used my wife's face," he said. "You used our marriage. And you did it because you thought I would believe you over her." Evelyn opened her mouth, closed it, then reached for the oldest trick she had. Tears. Not many. Just enough to glisten. "I did this because I love you," she whispered. "I was trying to save you before it was too late." But the thing about manipulation is that once someone sees the mechanism, it never looks like love again. Ethan stood up slowly, set his napkin beside his plate, and stepped back from the table as if he could no longer breathe the same air inside her version of the story. "No," he said. "You did it because you need to be the center of every room. And when you could not control Claire, you tried to destroy her." I had never heard him say anything like that to her. Neither had she. It showed. Her face did not crumple the way a hurt mother's would. It hardened. The softness vanished. The pearls, the polished lipstick, the careful little table settings suddenly looked less like elegance and more like camouflage. "She has turned you against me." Evelyn said sharply, pointing at me as if she could still make me the evidence instead of the victim. This is exactly what I warned your father about. Weak men let wives isolate them from family. Ethan stared at her, and in that second I saw something break loose in him that should have broken years ago. Do not talk about Dad, he said. And do not talk about Claire like she is the problem when you are sitting at a table covered in proof. He picked up the printed screenshots, folded them once, and slid them into his jacket. Then he looked at me. Ready? That one word did something to me I still have trouble explaining. 6 years of being measured, tested, doubted, and translated through Evelyn's preferences, and suddenly my husband was not asking me to endure one more dinner. He was asking me to leave with him. Yes, I said, and I stood. Evelyn rose too, fast enough to rattle her coffee spoon against the saucer. If you walk out over this, do not expect me to pretend everything is normal next Sunday. Ethan gave a short, humorless laugh. There will not be a next Sunday. We left her standing in the dining room she had ruled for decades, surrounded by roast dishes, coffee cups, and the neat little life she had built around being untouchable. The drive home was quiet, but it was not the old kind of quiet, the careful one filled with things I swallowed so peace could survive another day. This quiet was clean. When we got home, Ethan did 3 things before he even took off his shoes. He removed his mother from our shared photo albums. He changed the garage code she still somehow knew even though I had asked him twice before. Then he texted her one sentence. Do not come by without asking, and do not contact Claire again until I say otherwise. After that, he sat beside me on the couch and took my hand like he was learning the shape of it again. I should have seen it sooner, he said. I could have made him list every moment, every excuse, every time I had stood alone while he called it misunderstanding. But revenge had already happened at that table, and I had learned something important by then. Not every victory needs a speech. So I leaned my head against the back of the couch, looked at our reflection in the dark television screen, and said the only truth that mattered now. She used my face to build a lie, but in the end, you finally saw hers.